Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're always looking for an excuse to talk about Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
I'm Gregg Rosenthal. I'm here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio with my friend Jourdan Rodrigue for the first time since got back from Tokyo. Welcome, Jourdan. Excited for this show. Excited to welcome one of the greatest players that you ever covered. Later on in the show, Luke Kuechly will be joining us.
Yeah, that was a this is your life kind of moment for me watching him pop up on the screen. That dude has not changed at all. He still is so serious and handles everything with such preparation and clarity. He's like a time capsule.
Yeah, peek behind the curtain. Like he wanted to know, like, does he need to prepare for anything on the show? I was like, no, you don't, man.
Do we?
You're Luke Kuechly. But that was a great conversation. So we will listen to that a little bit later. And yeah, it's interesting. He's already going for his second year potentially, being considered for the Hall of Fame. But he's only 34 years old, obviously, because of that early retirement. It messes with you. He really is that young. We are gonna hit some news at the top, as we do. We're going to highlight just 5 injury situations. That's a lot of the news that's happening in these first days of training camp. As we're taping Wednesday, the majority of the league is having their very first practice of training camp on Wednesday. And we also have a little fun kind of inside the show news.
I'm wearing a shirt with a smiley face on it.
A smiley face. It's related to Jourdan. So stick around for the end. I'm excited to talk about
what whiplash
that
for the listener after a whole episode about death earlier this week. Now we're talking about a smiley face t-shirt.
I enjoyed the hell out of that conversation.
Loved it.
So yes, check out my conversation with Colleen Wolfe about the mortality that we all have to face every day, including with our own careers. But first, let's go positive. Let's listen to the most positive coach we have. Love to have Pete Carroll back in the league, talking about whether people like me are right to be just irrationally exuberant about the Raiders.
Oh, we got to win a ton. We got to win a bunch of games. There ain't nothing. I can't even imagine anything. I've been winning 10 games a year for 20 years or something. I mean, what are my expectations? We're going to win a bunch, and I don't care. Who hears that. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. It ain't about what anybody hears. It's about what we do.
I love him so much. I am all the way in, man. I have been high on the Raiders since John Spytek and Pete Carroll took over shop over there. I am high on the moves that they made. The Geno Smith trade I loved, and I'm all the way in. I mean, I know that is the AFC West is crazy, like literally, like crazy people are coaching these teams. But also, oh my gosh, I'm all the way in on the Raiders.
You can't fake belief, and it's really such a tricky thing, I think, for young coaches or coaches in general to have, because I truly do believe in the Raiders more because of the way Pete Carroll talks and the way he carries himself and the way he does believe and the way it has worked 10 wins a year. Now, I will point out, his first year in Seattle, they were under 500. It took a minute to get it going, but I do think that is an intangible tangible, that the belief that he has that's genuine can go across that building and it can actually make a difference. But also, there's only like one Pete Carroll. You can't really fake it. I'm so freaking jacked. So I know the secondary doesn't look great on paper, the linebackers, and yet I kind of believe they'll overcome it. On the flip side, I feel like the Colts have relatively bad vibes. Like over the last handful of years, but especially this year because their young franchise quarterback is in a position battle. Anthony Richardson was on the field throwing passes with Daniel Jones on Wednesday. Let's listen to Chris Ballard, their general manager, talk about the number 4 pick from a couple years ago.
Do you think people regret Baker Mayfield's timeline? Sam Darnold's timeline? Let's just go. Exactly. And so how about sometimes you got to have a little patience with a guy and let them grow through things. Now, there's got to be, like, if you just know this guy, no, he can't do it. But if you think, hey, he's on the right trajectory, why are you going to flush him just because people outside think you should flush him?
Okay, the first thing that when we were going over this sound before the show, the first thing both of us said was, hang on a minute. Those guys that he mentioned had their best success as reclamation projects for other teams with better vibes and better hands-on and really developmental coaching. But I do appreciate someone does, my colleague at The Athletic, James Boyd, does try to say this and interject and point this out.
Yeah, because does anyone regret it? And it's like, yeah, two teams, the Browns with Mayfield, although they had some fun with him, and definitely the Jets with Darnold. They regret that.
And the point was attempted, and he goes, exactly. But it's like, no, that's not what he was. You're disagreeing with the point while agreeing with yourself. It's just, ooh, man, dour comes to mind. Dour are the vibes over there.
It's a difficult situation because I think Chris Ballard and the Colts are talking a little bit out of both sides of their mouth, where I agree with what Chris Ballard is saying. I mean, Anthony Richardson is so young. Of course, you have to be patient.
And so toolsy, yeah.
I also think the team is the one that has put out very publicly that he needs to be under pressure and that he needs competition, and that, frankly, based on what I've picked up, and it's not that hard to connect the dots of where the sources are. I think they're inside the building. I think Daniel Jones has a great chance to win this job in week 1. I hope it doesn't happen, but it's tricky because you immediately start seeing like videos from training camp, and the first one I saw was Anthony Richardson skying like a 12-yard pass that should be very simple over his tight end, and Colts fans and other fans are like laughing in the mentions, and it's just the well's a little bit poisoned there. But I'm rooting for it because I want exciting football, and he is much more exciting.
I think the hard thing, and probably the thing that's difficult in the scouting and evaluation process of it, is sometimes he'll do this thing that breaks your brain with how unbelievably awesome it is. I remember that throw. It was candidate for throw of the year with you guys last year on the recap show, just on a line all the way down the field, like just incredible. But
his floor is higher than Daniel Jones's ceiling almost. I really believe that. It is
interesting because I do feel like this also is a Shane Steichen conversation. It certainly is a Chris Ballard conversation, but it's also a Shane Steichen conversation because Shane Steichen, you could see it when he sort of blew up on the field at Gardner Minshew, when Gardner Minshew was spot starting for them and missed a 4th down pass. And Shane Steichen strikes me as the person who just really wants to finally run the offense he wants to run, right? And even if the guy that could do that doesn't have a high ceiling, and even though the guy that could possibly do that does have a low floor, to get a guy in there like Daniel Jones, who's just going to run the offense that Shane Steichen wants to run, this is going to get complicated down the line. I believe the Colts that they're sticking with him. I believe it. I believe them. And I think they're being honest about that. And I do believe that quarterbacks should get more time than they generally do. But this is going to get complicated between what the coach wants and what the organization has to show.
I also believe, Brian Dable, that Russell Wilson is the starter in New York. He tried to poo-poo our Position Battles podcast from Monday, saying it's not a position battle. He didn't say that exactly, but what he said is that Russell Wilson will definitely be the starter. I get that, but Jackson Dart is kind of playing against the future version of Russell Wilson. So I think Russell Wilson is the week 1 starter. Jackson Dart has camp to basically show that he's a better option than Russell Wilson in week 3. After Russell Wilson struggles. And Jameis Winston, I think, has a chance to show that he's a better option, too, if Jackson Dart is not working out. And so that's kind of how that battle is going to play out, in my mind. Also in the NFC East, Terry McLaurin is not at training camp. Just kind of wanted to cross that T, that he actually is holding out. It's pretty rare in these times that you get a legitimate holdout with this CBA, but Terry McLaurin is not there at Washington camp. And then we got news, Jourdan, that Chris Godwin had another ankle surgery, and we'll pivot after this to the 5 injuries we want to keep an eye on. But I thought this was worth mentioning just separately. Chris Godwin had a separate ankle surgery, and even though Todd Bowles is saying, they're hopeful for week 1, it's a reminder when they gave him that contract, there was kind of no guarantees, and it was a really serious injury he is coming off of.
Yeah, I like a few things about how the Bucs have handled this. Obviously, they're giving him as much of a timeline as possible. That was a heartbreaking thing to watch for him last year. And then I sort of looked at some of this contract that he did get as back pay for outproducing the previous contract.
Great
that
point.
He was also working on. He's a franchise face and an absolute team class guy, captain class guy. I like the team building that they've done, not basically holding out hope for a timeline that they're still unsure of. This is still one of the deepest and best receiving cores in the entire NFL. And this is still a team that is going to be super competitive on offense, even with a couple of key figures, Tristan Wirfs included, missing for at least the first couple of weeks. They've got enough around them to still be an effective team. And it's not always a bad thing when key players join the team late. If you think you're a team that's going to make a postseason run because you're fresh in November when you come back.
That's fair. It's just with that big of an injury, you just hope for the best because he's one of the best dudes in the league. And it was a reminder, actually. It took him a while to come off his last ACL. He didn't really look like Chris Godwin, like for real, for really another season. So that could happen again. I think they have the depth, but it's just a reminder, sliding doors moments. The Patriots tried to give Godwin a huge deal, and the Bucs ended up matching it. And now the Patriots have Stephon Diggs instead.
I just like that they didn't say, okay, yes, we've got Mike Evans. Yes, we've got Jalen McMillan, who is outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have Sterling Shepard. And so, okay, we've got a 3. That's our 3 until Chris gets back. They didn't stand pat. They went out there and they got a player who is very similar to Chris Godwin in terms of the range and ability and personality and like readiness for the pros. And Emeka Egbuka, one of my favorite players, as you know, coming into this draft class. And I feel like this is a team that knows it's in their window right now, has Baker Mayfield playing the best football of his career and needs to push and needs to not just wait for things to be okay, needs to sort of force the issue in a way.
Yeah, and it might be just one of those things where you're lucky if you catch the Bucs early. They might be a team that you don't want to face later in the season, but we already know with the Wirfs and the Godwin injury, like it might take them a new offensive coordinator like a little while to get going. Just like this show does sometimes. But we're off and we're flying this time. And what we're going to do, just quickly, go back and forth. We're going to go do 5 injuries because I have this huge list of guys that are hurt to start camp. And I might list out some of them afterwards. But these guys, to me, were at a higher level. So just 5 injuries that have caught our eye early in camp. We'll start with one you were there for at Rams camp on, I'm losing track of days already, Tuesday.
I want to go take the listener inside baseball just a little bit. So the Rams sent out their list of players who would be available for media appearances this week. Matthew Stafford was not on it. The quarterback always talks in week 1 if he's throwing the football. So to me, my immediate flag was, he must not be throwing this week. So then, of course, you prepare and you get ready to go for opening when Sean McVay rolls out onto the podium, onto the lectern with his latest Matthew Stafford update. As we remember last year, this was a contract situation. This year, a little bit less serious than a lingering contract situation, but it's back soreness. For a 37-year-old quarterback who's dealt with this specific thing, according to Sean, before in his career, this very specific type of back issue that he's dealing with. So he's going to work to the side for the first 5 days of training camp. And then they were already planning on coming into camp with a modified throwing program for him to begin with. So this isn't serious until it potentially gets serious. I'm not, raising the alarm bells quite yet, but at 37 and missing the first part of camp, this is something to keep an eye on.
I think it's a general just reminder with him. He's been dealing with his back injury for a while that there's a reason why they played hardball with him. There is some risk to this Stafford contract at this age. There's really that risk with any player at this age.
Or any 37-year-old, frankly.
Or any football player, because it's like a car crash every single play, but especially Stafford at this stage. So that's a reminder. Joe Mixon is another guy I'm worried about. Aaron Wilson reported that he underwent another ankle surgery, and it was spun very positively that he will be back in camp, and they're expecting him to be ready, and it's all good. But that ankle injury essentially ruined his last season, and then he needed to get another surgery. So it's kind of like Godwin. When you're coming back for another one, and then you find out at the start of camp, to me, that is a pretty big red flag. And they signed Nick Chubb to add to the depth. Dameon Pierce is also on the PUP list. The Texans have 11 players on the PUP list. You never want to be leading the league in PUP to start. And I'm pretty sure the Texans are leading the league in injured players. So something to keep an eye on with Mixon. Let's go to the Giants for the next one.
Andrew Thomas.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. The difference. You pointed this out on a previous show, Greg. The difference in the Giants offensive line, having Andrew Thomas on the field, also during joint practices, because I remember he was going back and forth with a guy at joint practice that sparked a fight last year, and not having him on the field, at least for a little bit, especially when you're dealing with 3 new situations at quarterback. Andrew Thomas is going to miss the first part of camp.
Yeah, and it's not a shock coming off the surgery he is, but we didn't know, and he's just someone to watch.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily concerned. Malik Neighbors, by the way, is practicing to start camp. So I think more than any player that doesn't play quarterback in the league, Andrew Thomas can affect wins and losses in terms of an injury situation that we're watching. Another guy that reminds me of a little bit is Trent Williams when he is out for the 49ers. He's fine, but Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall are out of practice to start camp. Ayuk, that's not a surprise, but I mentioned him because John Lynch, the way he talked about the extent of the damage to Ayuk makes me worried that he's not going to be ready for a lot of this season, or might not be the Brandon Ayuk we're used to for a lot of this season. We'll see. The bigger concern to me is Ricky Pearsall, who's still dealing with this hamstring injury. And besides that tragic shooting that affected him last year, he had a lot of different injuries before and after that happened too. And so they're really thin there. They have the contract situation with Jennings. Let's wrap up our 5 injuries to watch with, yes, a downer in Vegas. It's not all.
Yeah. Christian Wilkins is still not ready to go. He missed all of OTAs while recovering from this Jones fracture, and he also is going to miss at least the first part of camp. This is a little bit tricky because these types of injuries with especially trench players can be so fickle. A Jones fracture is a fracture in your foot, bottom of your foot. And so obviously all of the weight that's going onto your feet, if you are a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman, in this case, Christian Wilkins being one of the better defensive linemen in the league. And I know that they built this defensive line out to try to get him to complement and free up even more opportunities for Max Crosby as much as possible. They're a little bit thin, a lot of young guys behind him, so this is going to be one to watch.
There was some good news there on the defensive line that Malcolm Kuntz, who's coming off a torn ACL, is practicing. And they also added an old Pete Carroll. I was going to say favorite, but was Jamal Adams a favorite of Pete Carroll's in Seattle? I didn't think so, but he's now a member of the Raiders. So just a couple little nugs before we get to our interview. Micah Parsons is also sitting out of practice with a quote-unquote back injury. It seems more like a contract-related thing.
Yeah, he told our colleague Jane Slater, he told her that he was protecting himself a little bit, but also wanted to be there for his teammates, do everything possible, versus other than like put his body in danger.
It was very funny seeing Trevon Diggs, who said his feelings were hurt by them taking away this $500,000 bonus for not showing up. That's not what's funny. I totally understand that. It was funny to me, him being at Parsons' media availability and just kind of standing there and every once in a while being like, yeah, that's messed up and stuff like that. He was very much like the Flavor Flav to Micah Parsons' Chuck D, and was just kind of like rallying like how messed up it is, how they're treating Parsons. So they were almost presenting a united front. I love that stuff. A couple other just news and nuggets. Julian Blackmon, who's been on my top 101 free agents list over the years a couple times, was signed by the Saints to replace Tyrann Mathieu. The Panthers cut Josie Jewell. I feel really bad for him. A concussion that he hasn't been able to overcome is really affecting him. The Titans saw one of their edge rushers, Lorenzo Carter, who's had a really solid career, retire at the start of training camp. There's always a couple of those guys. And then a few more pup listers that just caught my eye. Quay Walker had an ankle surgery over the offseason, the Packers linebacker. L'Jarius Sneed is still not ready to practice. Darren Waller, coming off that retirement, is not ready to go. Elgton Jenkins is very similar to the maybe Parsons situation, or maybe it's contract related. And then Taysom Hill is still not ready to go for the Saints.
Yeah, you sprinkled in Taysom Hill there at the end. I was watching the Google Doc. I was like, oh yeah, Taysom Hill. So yeah, the Darren Waller thing, he told local reporters over there in Miami that they just were going to onboard him gradually at his age, and also having spent some time out of football making music videos. That's obviously important to onboard slowly.
Yeah, he was very reflective and was talking about sometimes he was not being the man that he was saying that he was, and not really walking the walk when he was talking the talk. And he was talking very specifically about his recovery from addiction. So we really wish Darren Waller the best.
With Frank Smith, by the way, as somebody who was a really strong figure for him during that time. I know we talked about it on a previous show, but those two back together, hoping for the best for him in that journey and sort of self-discovery.
And might have a really big role for that Dolphins team, who is looking for some more offensive weapons outside their top 2 receivers. So I had to get this into the show. We didn't have time for it with Colleen, and we'll be quick on it. But Phillip Rivers suddenly retired again on Monday.
Gosh golly.
Officially as a member of the Chargers. Now, officially, he actually had retired a couple years ago. He hasn't played in the NFL since 2020, but every year you saw those stories where Phillip Rivers is coaching a high school team, and he's like, hey, if anyone wants to call, I want to play. So it actually took him a little while to officially retire, but the Chargers are actually practicing fully in pads. They're the first team to do that in San Diego this week. They had one on Tuesday. They're going to have another on Wednesday. So I think that all matched up, and man, I love me some Phillip Rivers, and they did such a good job with this like video of Rivers announcing how he wanted to retire as a member of the Chargers.
Thankful for those 16 years and for entrusting me to be the quarterback, and certainly never took it for granted.
Come on, keep fighting. Just keep fighting.
I never took it for granted. Getting to suit up and lead the Chargers for 240-something games in a row.
All right, let's take a break on that.
Oh.
Golly.
I'm not ashamed to say that when Rivers was saying golly, and he cries earlier in that video too, it was getting a little misty up in Santa Monica, me watching that. One of my favorite players, and I think one of the most underrated players of his generation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have some longtime friends who are San Diego Chargers fans, who were San Diego Chargers fans, who have been disappointed for a couple of years, just about everything, the move and all of that. And but one thing everyone can agree on is Phillip Rivers, and the fact that the team and himself collaborated on this, the fact that they're practicing in San Diego in the Harbaugh regime, it speaks quietly and also loudly of the efforts that they're trying to do as an organization and as a team. And Phillip Rivers is like this universal. I mean, I could listen to every single mic'd up of him that's ever existed. I could listen to him read the dictionary as long as he sprinkled in his version of expletives. Gosh golly, gall darn.
And and I love all that about him too. And we're gonna go to break with him actually kind of talking about some of that trash talk. I love that. But also just the way he played football, I think brought people in. I mean, I don't think he was a gunslinger because I don't think he wasn't reckless, but with that throwing motion, to be as vertical a quarterback as he is still one of the all-time leaders in NFL history in yards per attempt, and he's going to be up for the Hall of Fame soon. And like, if Eli Manning makes it ahead of Phillip Rivers, I'll go insane, because at every single point, in every single year of their career, the entire NFL would have taken Phillip Rivers over Eli Manning, and Phillip Rivers got MVP votes a couple times. He was top 5 quarterback, I would say.
Never missed a start.
Right.
252 games.
I did the QB index and stuff, and he was very often a top 5 quarterback throughout his career, probably 6, 7, 8 years of his career, which to me is not stamp him into the Hall of Fame right away, but it means it's a guy that will probably get there and should get there eventually, and was certainly a better player than Eli Manning. I'm just saying. And when he pointed out, and it is one of the things they lost moving from San Diego, the atmosphere and what he remembers is riding down that hill into Qualcomm and the parking lot. San Diego Chargers fans used to get grief. It was one of the best atmospheres in the entire. They would be tailgating the entire day. You would smell that food. You would smell that weed. And it was just thousands and thousands of people. And it was an incredible atmosphere. And they're essentially renting this SoFi Stadium. And that's one thing they've really lost, and I think was really unfortunate. I don't think that should be lost either. So when Rivers said that really stuck with me, because I was at one of the last last couple games at Qualcomm, and it was just an awesome atmosphere.
And let's be clear, he is a San Diego Charger until the end.
Yes.
Because this, I know I'm not the only one that cares about this, but sometimes it feels like these little gestures just get so lost in our just collective zeitgeist and all the things that happen all the time. But the class with which he showed the local newspaper people that covered him for so many years for the San Diego Union Tribune, he announced his first retirement to the local columnist who had covered him for so long, been in the trenches, watched him grow up, essentially, Kevin Acey. And I will never forget that. That was a big moment for somebody of that platform to go to the local people versus the national platforms to announce something that significant. It just, that homey vibe that Phillip Rivers always had, that locality, I feel like was just a big part of who he was.
Great dude. I almost kind of forget he was an LA Charger taking the trip up to up the 405 and threw some big-time touchdowns to Mike Williams, who just retired this week. I remember in that game against Kansas City in Arrowhead. We will be back on the other side of the break with Luke Kuechly. But, yeah, let's first listen on the way out to Rivers talking a little trash.
Good night! Good night!
There are some clips that I look at and just shake my head.
90-yard touchdown!
And then some I go, dang, that was a lot of fun.
I'm just having fun.
Yeah, is there an edginess to it? You know, are you trying to get under the skin of the opponent? Of course. Is there some of it that's just a lot of fun? Again, it's in the backyard.